Well, from the interest rate announcements to load shedding, some small movement in the wage negotiations between Eskom and the unions there, NUMSA, the NUM and Solidarity. Remember last year that, well, strike at Eskom certainly looked like a strike that led to intense load shedding. Now Eskom is raising its wage offer to 4.5%. Its first offer was 3.75%, but unions are asking for as much as 12%. Andrew Levy is a Labour analyst. He joins us now. Andrew, good afternoon to you. Okay, there's a huge gap between the sides in this negotiation. You've got 4.5% on the one side, around 12% on the other. Is it possible that the various parties can get an agreement from this kind of distance?
It is, Stephen. And let me say this, that both parties know they are not going to get their figures. So for Eskom, it ain't going to be 4.5%. And insofar as the union is concerned, they know they haven't a hope of getting 12%. But unfortunately, their style of bargaining, and you will see it everywhere, is exactly the same. We go in for double digits, we stop at around 12%, and we wait. And really, I think that's very foolish in the hope. So my sense of this is that the settlement figure is probably around 6.5%, maybe 6.8 at the outside. Which frankly is more than can be afforded by by Eskom, and we all know that. But the interesting issue for me is that Eskom is an essential industry, so they are not allowed to strike. But they do strike, as we know. A year or so ago, we had a big stoppage, and it had a very serious effect on production, on homes, on hospitals, etc., etc. They are supposed to go to wage arbitration. Now, there's no question that if they go to arbitration, the arbitrator will find far more closer to the employer's number, and I would say 5.5, 6.5. But if they put a good case on the table, the sympathy will not be with the unions, that's for sure. And if the unions enter into arbitration at 12%, they're sunk. The arbitrator will do nothing for them. But the real risk is that if the parties cannot get through this break, this deadlock, that we will have another strike. And that will have huge, huge ramifications and tremendous impact right throughout the country. Under those circumstances, I think government will do what they usually do, and that is that they...
Oh dear. Andrew Levy, are you still with us? We seem to have lost you there. All right, we'll try and get him back. It seems that he was concerned about something happening on his cell phone there, but we will try and get him back for you on that. Those wage negotiations still underway, we understand. Well, staying with Eskom, the former Eskom CEO, Andrew Director, could be back to face the public accounts watchdog Scopa almost a month after his last appearance. The committee wants him back to respond to questions they say are unanswered. Director claimed that senior ANC politicians are benefiting from alleged corruption at Eskom, but he refused to name them. Former Scopa Chair Themba Gordy says all three parties should have been present in the hearings at the same time to avoid shifting blame.
I do remember that there was once a hearing where Mr. Director, the board of Eskom, and the Hawks were in one room. And the Director said, I wrote letters to the police to complain about stuff. And I think for me that was an opportunity where the committee should have nailed things down. But it appears things just slipped through the fingers. And I think we are likely to have the drama, a legal conundrum, where if Mr. Director is subpoenaed and does not come, then he has a legal case hanging over his head that might have implications over whether he will ever set foot in the country or not.
Andrew Levy, the Labour analyst, back with us now. Andrew, afternoon again. You were making the point that in your view an arbitrator would be more on the side of Eskom than on the side of the workers. Why do you believe that?
Well, I think that, albeit, subconscious, there are very few South Africans who have a great deal of sympathy for Eskom because of the hardship they're all suffering. And, at arbitration, particularly over wages, it's not a question of emotion. It's not a question of what one wants. You're looking at factors such as comparability and affordability. Now, if you compare the Eskom wages for example, and any wages in the public sector to private sector, the median wage in Eskom is around about 48,000 rand a month. Okay. Bear in mind the national minimum wage is around about 5,000 rand a month. These are highly paid people. So they are not poorly paid. The other factor which an arbitrator would look at is, can the employer afford this kind of increase? And ultimately, we all know that what happens is that Eskom has to borrow money. The government has to bail them out to fund, current expenditure, not capital expenditure, on wages, and that just increases the debt. So it would be a very odd arbitrator who would not be moved by those arguments. On the other side, and if one sets aside the subconscious view, and that's hard to do as an arbitrator, and you simply say, well, how realistic is the union's position of 12%? And they'll look at the comparable settlements and they'll see that they're 6.5% on average, which means some are 4, some are 5, some are 7.5, maybe 7.8. But nowhere is there 12%. And if I was negotiating, and I issue this challenge now, I challenge the negotiating unions to name publicly 3 places where they have had an overall increase at an average of 12%. It can't be done. So this is tantamount to bad faith bargaining. And that's why one hopes that via media can be found. Now, what would happen here, and I would think it's before we would have a strike, is that the dispute would be declared, it would go to conciliation. So a conciliator, and no doubt they will select a highly skilled one, will try and bring the parties together. And that may resolve the issue. Worst outcome, there's a strike. That's the worst outcome for the country. Not a good outcome for the union is they get forced into arbitration at too high a figure. Okay. So I think one's got to be careful of that. Insofar as the employer is concerned, well, they're at 4.5% now. I think they've got another 1.5% in the bag easily, and they can be pushed. And then, of course, there's always the political dimension, and I don't believe for 1 minute that there would not be pressure put on both Eskom and the unions to reach an agreement. On top of all our woes, this would be a very sad thing. So I'm hopeful that settlement will be found, 6.5%, somewhere around there. Frankly, that would be a very good settlement. I don't know that it would be matched by any improvement in efficiency in order to try and absorb the additional costs. But if it keeps the lights burning a little longer, albeit on a partial basis, that would be a good outcome.
Does public opinion matter in all of this? I mean, people are frustrated at Eskom. They're frustrated at workers too. We're assailed on a daily basis by claims of corruption at Eskom. If I remember correctly, even the NUM said that there was corruption in the power stations, and wasn't quite saying its members, but I think was heading that way. I mean, if workers went on strike now, or if workers were seen to demand too much, would that matter?
It would. Mobilizing public opinion for your cause is one of the most important secondary factors in any strike anywhere in the world. And what the parties will do, and, we can see it already. There was a fairly strong attack in, I think, the Financial Mail from the unions on the Eskom negotiators, is to try and persuade people that, right and justice is on your side and you're poorly paid and this, that, and the other. And you do get a lot of support. And that strengthens the resolve of the people on strike, and it strengthens the bargaining power around the table. Eskom is not going to get that, or the unions, are not going to get that kind of support insofar as they're concerned. So I think that's problematic, and I think it would undermine and sap the willingness of people to go on a lengthy strike. And of course, given the fact that they are not supposed to strike, and this is against the law, one looks at other times, at other countries, And one can take Thatcher, for example, but that's by no means the only example where governments have been forced to bring in the troops to keep the coal coming into the power stations, to stop the pickets destroying things, and to keep the furnaces burning. This has happened many times. Would this government bring in the troops? I can't see it. And I would think that there would be many questions in their mind as to the loyalty of our soldiers. So we really have got to hope that good sense will prevail, and the parties will be able to find themselves. But other than sticking my neck out on where I think the settlement would be, I'm trying to keep my options open. This is a very difficult one to call.
Andrew, we remember what happened last year. This year, there's some reporting that there's goodwill on both sides, which came as a bit of a surprise to me. But how important is that? Is there a chance that the sort of nature of this crisis means that everyone involved actually needs these negotiations to finish fast?
Yes, there is. And there's no doubt about that. And, if both parties have the will to find themselves, then they will do it. And it could well be that, tactically the unions are going to, declare the dispute so they can show their members that they've got all the fire and brimstone that they need. They'll go into conciliation and they will then blame the conciliator. It's not us guys, we were pushed, there was pressure. And that makes it easier for them. So that could well be the outcome. I would expect that almost all the senior leadership of the unions must understand the precarious position we're in and equally understand the difficulty of their position. But, as we heard from the earlier speaker, people are really feeling the pinch. And whether you earn 5,000 or 45,000, you're not as comfortable as you may have been. And there are always pockets of militancy amongst the workers, and many other workers are, in point of fact, apathetic. This is also something that happens. So that's the dynamic. But it is possible that a settlement will be found. It's also possible, and these are the best outcomes we can hope for, that what we're seeing now is just the rhetoric around the negotiation table. It's just much like saying, mine's bigger than yours. But hopefully there could be a settlement, but it's by no means a foregone conclusion or a walk in the park.
Andrew Levy, thank you very much indeed, the Labour analyst. Really do appreciate the time. Thanks very much.